again, humans. It is Mr. Bell, and this is going to be our fourth exercise in working on our gargoyles. So I'm going to open mine up. I made a little bit more progress off camera on my gargoyle. It's starting to come together. Starting to kind of get that look that I'm really looking for. I'm starting to kind of sculpt his nose and his kitty cat cheeks going, and I'm gonna try to make his kitty cat nose going forward, and I think I'm gonna begin really making some teeth. Remember, I'm gonna make all of these things that are kind of sticking off of him. I'm gonna use these. I'm gonna make these as kind of like separate parts, and then I'm gonna put them all together as I get nearer to this. But right now, I still need to finish fleshing out my gargoyle's face. And I still need to start. I'm going to start again making teeth for him. So again, I'm getting to that point where it's starting to look a lot more like I want it to look. I might think about putting my lid on pretty soon, but not today, because remember, you want to kind of do that last when you're done with this, because you want access to the inside here so you can use it to support when you're squishing things, just squish it all together. Again, you want that inside to be relatively smooth, but it doesn't really matter what it looks like. Nobody's going to see it. So again, I'm gonna push. I want his cheeks to be a little bit bigger, so I'm gonna grab that. Remember, your supplies, like your it works in progress. Remember, always try to keep it sealed. You want as little air to get in as possible. I'm gonna use this little chunk. And I want his cheeks to be equally sized. And I've been doing this as I've been making this. I've been aware of this, that I'm going to do this. But now again, I'm going to make a ball of clay because I want these cheeks to be even, which means I want to use about the same amount of clay. Again, make that ball, and then you can just pinch it in half, bam, and then roll them up again. Make sure they're about the same, and that's about the same amount of clay. I don't want to add all of that to his cheeks because I think they're getting pretty close to done. So I'm going to do that same thing with this one. Now I have two equal amounts, and I think this is going to be, I think maybe even a little less. I'm going to add these two amounts of clay to my character. Sometimes when I'm making sculptures like this, I'm going to leave it on the ground or leave it on my surface that I'm making it with. But mostly when you're working on this, you probably want to be holding it and then supporting that inside part while you design the outside. So I want this guy's cheek. So look at how his mouth kind of has this wiggly, there's like these jowls kind of hang down a little bit on my design. And I want that to come through. So I'm going to take my handy dandy pencil this time. I'm going to do some score marks here. Remember, that just makes more surface area for this clay to stick together when you combine it. So I'm going to add those. I'm going to do the same thing with this. Scratch, 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 scratch. And then this, I want it to go here to push out these jowls just a little bit more. Dip my finger in the water just to get it wet and make this clay a little smoother. And then I'm going to literally just stick there and I'm going to blend it in like so. Really just trying to get these chunks of clay that you're adding, you want them to look like they're just the same part. And they really, really are once you stick them together. And this clay is pretty fused. It's basically the same chunk of clay now. And I'm going to do the same thing over here with this guy. Make sure it sticks real good. I'm going to put it right here, kind of trying to match this form that I made over here with this. And then when I get done with this, I can look at it and say, hey, is this what I want it to look like or not? And if it's not, I can pinch off a little clay from it, or I can add a little bit more if I want it to be larger. Really remember too that when you're working with clay, you're making sculptures, no matter what, really, your hands are the most valuable tools. Really good at smoothing stuff out. Your hands, they're valuable, valuable tools. And then notice too how he has this kind of cleft palate that sticks up to his nose. I really do want to push that. I think that's going to really add to it. So I'm going to use my pencil again. Just really make sure that line is visible. I'm going to smooth this line out as I go, but that's just kind of a reference I'm going to keep. I think his cheeks are coming together. I look at this and I see that this line swoops in a little deeper than this. So I feel like there's maybe a little too much clay over here. So I'm going to just pinch off a tiny bit of it. And then I'm going to re-smooth it and make sure that that's the way I want it to be. Supporting the inside with my thumb. Bam. I think that is going to look a lot better. A little bit flat there. Remember, with clay, you can almost think of it as like drawing, in the sense that you can erase things just by removing a little clay, or you can add new clay to it, depending on how you want it to look. I think that's coming together pretty well. I want this divot right here to be about the same as this. I'm going to add it out there. Bam. I think this is going to be a pretty good basic form for this guy. Again, when I'm kind of getting closer to done with this, I'm going to really take my time with adding details and stuff like that. But really, I'm still in that mode of getting kind of the basic form that I want. And then I know going forward, I can always change this. I'm going to push this out a little bit. Now I'm going to make his nose. And again, I'm not going to make this perfect, but I want to have a representation for it. And I look at this and I think I can divide this nose basically into 3 parts. So I'm going to take just a tiny bit of clay. And I'm going to add it where I want that nose. So I'm going to take, I think, just a tiny bit. Maybe about that much should do it. Then I'm going to divide this into 3 kind of equal circles or spheres. Bam, 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 bam. Then I'm going to add these. I want these 2 ones that are a little smaller to be on the outside of his nose. I'm going to use this chunk to kind of make up the middle part of his nose. I'm going to stick that middle on there first. Smooth it on. Oh, got to score it. Scratch, 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 scratch. Add it. I'm going to add a little bit of moisture to it. Really smooth that nose on. Like so. Then I'm going to add these guys on the side. So these are going to be kind of like the nostril part of his nose. Stick those guys on there. Smooth it out. You see how adding that little ball of clay is really kind of pushing that nose out, and it's going to start to like look a little bit more like that form that I'm really looking for here. And again, when you're doing this, if your sculpture happens to stop kind of looking like the design you made, and it's looking like kind of a whole new creature, that's totally fine. You can absolutely keep going with that. Remember, the clay kind of sometimes can take on a life of its own, and it can make you kind of guide you in your decision processing, how this goes. You know, remember, start trying your best to get your form here, but if it doesn't end up looking the same, that is totally okay. I want to remind myself of his mouth here, so I'm going to draw that line in again. Again, I'm probably going to smooth this out. I'm going to put teeth all over this. This is definitely going to change, but I want to keep this as kind of a reference for how I'm going to go forward with this. Bam. I've had a couple kids already say, "Mister, my sculpture was left out overnight and it totally dried out and now I can't work with it anymore." You know, that's not the end of the world. You have more clay to work with, but it's probably at that point, if you're really gonna have to start over for it, you just gotta kind of bite that bullet and you gotta start over. I'm going to trace out this nose. So I have this shape of this nose. I want to keep that shape. So I'm putting another line in it here using my pencil just to kind of remind me of where I want these shapes to really end up looking like. And I think I want his nose to appear like it's a completely different shape. So I'm probably going to go back and add another little bit to his nose. But again, I'm still just working on that general shape for my sculpture. You can always change things as you're going forward, and you can add details later. As you're adding stuff, you're probably going to bury a bunch of those details, so don't waste time on them now. So I think that's looking pretty decent for the basic shape. So now I'm going to make like 3 or 4 teeth for him, and I'm going to start joining those to his face as a form. This clay's getting a little dry, so I'm going to add a little bit of water, fold it in. Bam. So now I'm going to be making teeth. I'm going to make them individual shapes. You never really want, and like things that stick off of your sculpture, you probably want to treat them like they're individual little sculptures that you're ultimately going to combine into a big sculpture. So these teeth, I'm going to start with the center teeth here. I want them to be the same size. So I'm going to do that same thing I did, is make a ball of clay. Then I'm going to divide it in half, and then each one of these will ultimately be one of those teeth. For these shapes, these are kind of long and skinny, so I'm going to start making them with like that coil technique, making that snake. But then I'm going to slowly roll it between my fingers so it starts to become a cone shape like so. Thicker on the top than it is on the bottom. And I think this looks pretty good. So I'm going to put that guy to the side. I'm going to make another one using that same technique. Rolling out a little snake and then kind of pinching it in between my fingers and rolling that in so it becomes a cone shape again. I think that looks pretty good. I want these to be kind of similar, but I like that maybe they're going to be a little different size. Kind of adds a craggliness to his jaw. And they go right about there. I think that these teeth, this is going to be a good example of, I'm going to go in a different direction in my design. I like this tooth being a little larger, but now that I look at it, I think I want to shrink it a little. So I'm going to start again, and I'm going to use just a little bit more clay. Or a little bit less clay, that is. Same technique, though. Making that snake. Then pinching the end of it so it becomes sharp. Rolling it out kind of like that. That's looking good. Kind of give it a little bit of a curve. Then I'm going to add it right there. I'm going to make a square mark here on the upper lip because that's where I want it to really connect. And then I'm going to kind of connect it down here, too. I'm going to add that tooth right there. I want it to kind of appear like it's going under the lip, so I'm going to smooth this out. I'm going to really attach it well. And then I'm going to go back with my pencil, and I'm going to add a line there. You want this to be connected. This right now is super fragile. If I was to fire it, and then just a little bump on this tooth could totally just knock it out of there. So I don't want to do that. I want to really make it as secure as I can. These are ultimately going to be pretty fragile. Things that are made out of ceramic tend to be that way, but we want to make it as strong as we can. So I'm really going to push this clay on the inside here. I'm going to really give it a good squish into the other clay. And then ultimately, I think I'm going to want this tooth to kind of have like a line that kind of shows it like that. So I'm going to draw that line again. I'm going to get rid of this line, I'm sure, but just as a little reference. I'm going to add another little fang over here using that same piece of clay. It's going to go right there. And again, gently smooth it on. Like so. And I'm going to do the same technique I just did, squishing that clay on the back kind of into it, making sure that it's stuck real good. Like so. Like so. And then you see that there's like some jagged marks there, and we'll go back and smooth that out later. But right now, I think that looks pretty good. He's really getting there. I think I've made some pretty decent sculpture progress for this. This is about, again, the progress I want you to have. I want your basic form of your head to be made. And I want you to have been starting to add some details to this bad boy. The next thing I think I'm going to do after I finish his teeth, and I'm probably going to do that off camera, is I'm going to start adding his eyes next. And that'll really push me towards that point where I'm about to put the lid on this head and start really working on the details of this bad boy. Bam. Before I'm going to store this guy, though, I am going to give it a paint job, just using my finger, just kind of putting some water on it, because this clay is getting a little dry because I've been storing it for many days now. So do yourselves a favor, give your clay just a little bit of water before you store it, just so you know for sure when you work on this again, especially since it's likely you're not going to work on this for the whole weekend. You want to let it have some water to sit with. Paint the inside as well, not just the outside. Bam. And then I am also going to take the clay that I've already made and put that guy in there. I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to give it another little paint job too, because I want to make sure I can use this later as well. Bam. Then I'm going to seal it up real good. Make sure if you got any clay from your bag of clay, make sure that's super sealed as well. I'm not going to make you watch me clean up my station here, but make sure you're doing that. Remember, you don't want this dust from the clay to be in your environment. It's really bad for your electronics, and it's really bad for your lungs as well.